Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster, Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Welcome, my truth warriors and mythbusters to the Naked Truth Report. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells, and we're going to have a great show. We're going to talk with Professor Wilfred Reilly. He's my guest. He has a fantastic book. I haven't read it yet. I want to read it. But just the title is fantastic, and the timing is even better. The title of the book is Hate Crime Hoax. Right? Hate crime hoax. How the left is selling a fake race war. I mean, you couldn't get better timing than this, right? Because why? Because of Jussie Smollett. I mean, that is just such a coincidence. I don't know how he timed that exactly right like that. I'm going to have to ask him when he comes on the phone. Oh, but before I bring my guest on, I want to say hello to Valerie, my Lyft driver. Are you listening, Valerie? She said she would listen. My car, my check engine light was flashing on my car, so I was afraid to drive in, so I got a Lyft driver. And Valerie was my driver. She was a very nice young lady. She's going to Santa Monica College. Hi, Valerie. Anyway, I'm so excited to get to my guest. And in fact, I was just watching on YouTube a debate, the great debate he did in 2016 with Jared Taylor on how is diversity good for America? That's an interesting thing. I'm going to have him on again and talk about that. But first, let's talk about this hate crime hoax. How the left is selling a fake race war. Why would they do that? Hi, Professor Reilly. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm great. Listen, that debate you gave with Jared Taylor, that's interesting. We're going to have to discuss that. But before we get to that, I want to talk about why is the left selling a fake race war? Why? What would motivate them to do that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
No, I think that question is kind of the introduction to the book. So, I mean, as you said, I wrote the book, Hate Crime Hoax, just out with Regnery Publishing. And what I look at is an interesting and bizarre phenomenon. If you look at many or most of the widely publicized hate crime cases that we've seen in the media in the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whether you're talking about Jussie Smollett, you mentioned that, broke that down. That's a crazy story.
That's a crazy story.
Yeah, Covington Catholic, I mean, literally about a week before that, where the claim was that this group of prep school athletes surrounded literally a Native American Indian elder, screamed threats at him, chanted, "Build the wall," threatened to take his tribe's sacred rain drum. Yasmin Saweed, the young woman who claimed that Trump supporters surrounded her on a train in 2016, tore at her hijab, called her a terrorist. Eastern Michigan, the incident of graffiti targeting young brothers. Air Force Academy, where a general had to come to campus and speak against racism. Wisconsin Parkside, nooses found across this Pleasant College campus. University of Virginia, where the claim was that the fraternities were running anti-feminist rape rings. Duke Lacrosse, the OG. All of these have been fakes. And as a quantitative social scientist, I was curious about that. You don't normally see that kind of rate of false reporting. So
when were you motivated? When did you start realizing this, and what motivated you to write it? Realizing it, the numbers, all the fake incidences, or did you just have a feeling? What motivated you to write the book?
Well, it actually began with a fairly personal story. I'm from Chicago. I was born on the south side of Chicago. I grew up on the east side of nearby Aurora. I moved back to the north side, worked in the trading floor, sales floor sector for a while. So I'm from that city. And there were two very famous hate crime cases around 2012, 2013 that occurred in Chicago. One was the burning of a club called Velvet Ultra Lounge, which was a gay and bisexual focused kind of hipster and ferns all over the place, but a young nightlife lounge. And I had friends that patronized that business, that enjoyed the club. And the Velvet Ultra Lounge was burned to the ground, and someone used spray paint to write horrific anti-gay slurs throughout the building. They used some kind of accelerant like alcohol to set the building on fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I paid attention to what happened in that case. This started about 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And just a little bit later, there was an incident at the University of Chicago where a student protester, a student activist named Garrett Cockeline, claimed that hackers had broken into his Facebook page and were messaging him threats of rape, extreme anti-Hispanic violence. So I paid attention to that. And over the course of about 6 months, both cases turned out to be complete fakes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is personally kind of offensive. I mean, I knew some of the people involved, although tangentially.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Velvet Ultra Lounge case, the owner, Frank Elliott, owed a lot of money to a range of people you might not have wanted to owe money to, most frighteningly the government, and just set his own business on fire. That's what turned out to be the case. He was exposed as having been the arsonist. He poured Everclear, I believe, throughout his bar and set it on fire.
Mm-hmm.
There was no hate. There was no anti-gay bias. In that region of Chicago, there probably wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
The University of Chicago case, similarly, the FBI got involved. I would assume they tracked IP addresses, and they found out the threat came from the kid. He just literally logged to his own Facebook page and messaged himself.
Mm-hmm.
And looking around, it became very apparent that a lot of these cases, there was a similar case at Grand Valley State where a young black woman said that on the first day of Black History Month, someone had written all these slurs on her dorm room door on her artboard.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan Tech student was accused of threatening to kill black students on campus. In fact, he said he was going to shoot them a smile because they were his Christian brothers.
Mm-hmm.
All these cases kept falling apart. So I started looking at some of the resources out there that were considered kind of conservative, kind of under the radar, but fakehatecrimes.org, Fake Hate Map. And it was very apparent that there were hundreds of these, maybe thousands.
Mm-hmm.
So I set out to do kind of a scientific study. I mean, I used Google Scholar and so on to scan through media, put together a list of 409 of them. That's currently up to 516. That's almost entirely concentrated in the last 5 years. So from that point of realizing, hey, there are, a bleep of a lot of these, the question became why? And I think that's the great question you asked me as a lead-in.
Mm-hmm.
I think two reasons. First, most people who commit crimes, aren't brilliantly insightful figures out of a Russian novel trying to understand the human condition. They're bad people who are lazy.
Mm-hmm.
So people commit crimes for money, sex, local attention. Those are the same reasons many people commit hate crimes or hate crime hoaxes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you burn down your business, I mean, normally, if a business catches fire in the nightlife industry, for example, as you probably know, there's going to be an intensive insurance investigation. That's probably going to be speeded up if there happens to be the phrase Arab go home or Trump rules or something written on the structure.
Mm-hmm.
So many people that falsify hate crimes are doing so at some level as insurance fraudsters or something like that, low-level criminals. But the better, bigger question, which you asked, is why these cases become famous, why they're nationally prominent, why they keep happening. And I think there you get into the existence of kind of the American grievance or victimhood industry.
Mm-hmm.
A problem for the organized left, and this is one reason why I didn't have a problem with a partisan title for my book. A problem for the organized left is that the demand for bigotry, for racist evil, greatly outweighs the supply.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really have a lot of racist evil anymore on either side. Whites and blacks are no longer fighting in the street with sticks.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an entire block of entities. Southern Poverty Law Center has a well-invested endowment of $432 million. Groups like Al Sharpton's National Action Network, Rainbow Coalition, the NAACP, although actually I'm a member of the NAACP, I think they do some good. But
really?
The newer factions.
But,
and,
basically, Democrats would go out of business if there wasn't racial animus.
I don't know about the Democratic Party, but the leftists. What holds the left coalition together, I think, is a generalized sense of anger at the USA.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at a lot of the kind of friendships that occur over there, now you could say I'm pretty politically centrist. You could say the same thing about passionate evangelical Christians and billionaire businessmen on the right. But the problem is much more serious on the left. I mean, if you look at feminists and transgender, quote unquote, women, gay people and practicing Muslims is a really interesting one. Illegal immigrants and union workers. The only thing that holds these groups together is sort of a generalized sense of anger, an idea that nothing really has changed in America.
Mm-hmm.
And leftist politicians will very openly say this. I mean, I remember one of the few times I've laughed out loud at a debate was when Joe Biden was speaking to a black audience and he was asked what he thought about Mitt Romney, and he put on a black accent and said, "He gonna put y'all back in chains."
Mm-hmm.
And it struck me as just an absurd, off-the-radar comment. I mean, Mitt Romney was one of the most clean-cut, wonky, high-level political candidates we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that he was a ranting racist who, if you remember all that stuff, was pimping women. He had binders full of women. He was strapping dogs to the top of his car. All of this was just nonsense, but it's pretty standard for the hard left in that the unifying idea is bigotry is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of keeping the thoughts on track here, yeah, that is the motivator for a lot of these groups that are involved in promoting hate scares that turn out to be hate hoaxes. CARE, Council for American Islamic Relations, MECHA and the Aztlan movement, Antifa, Occupy, BLM, Black Lives Matter. The unifying idea is that America is still in the darkness of 1954.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, in this sense, that Democrats have kept Black Americans, they have precluded them from real wealth. In fact, we've regressed economically. So the devil is in the details. The devil is the Democrats, not the conservatives, because Democrats are the party that we have been voting for consistently, and they're the party that has kept us relegated to a permanent underclass. So the irony to me, I mean, if you dig in the data, this is true. So the irony to me is how they get away with this farce.
Well, I think that there's a lot there. I mean, so first of all, I think any group that votes, and your vote has to be worth something.
Mm-hmm.
So any group that votes 100% for any party is going to be, this would also, although to a lesser extent, apply to, say, poor white farmers in the South.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a guaranteed voting bloc, politicians tend to be pretty ruthless alpha personality people. You're not going to get very much.
Right.
I would agree that social programs, so the problems of the contemporary Black community don't have a whole lot to do with racism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the evidence for that is that most of them were much less severe when Blacks and whites literally were at one another's throat.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and, you know, Thomas Sowell says the same thing. Thomas Sowell says the same thing. I mean, if you dig in the data, you know that's true. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go into kind of logical proofs here, and I think you do, I mean, if you look at something like the illegitimacy rate, for example, the real way of describing no father in the home, no father coming.
Mm-hmm.
In 1961, if I recall this correctly, for African Americans, that was 17%. For whites, it was even lower. It was 6%. Right now, that rate is 75% for African Americans. You can correct this. It may be a point or two higher.
Right.
And it's 34% for all whites. It's about 56% for poor whites.
Right.
So
LBJ gave a commencement speech at Howard University on there. I think he said it was like two-parent families was at 66% or something like that. Some people argue with that figure and say, say it was 70%. But in the 60s, let me tell you folks, listeners, in the 60s and 70s, 1965, LBJ was complaining that Black folks only had 66% two-parent families in the 1960s, okay? The other thing I want to mention that you brought up is that you were brought into this hate crime hoax business. You highlighted a crime that took place in 2012. Now, this was before Trump came on the scene, right? Wasn't Obama our president then? So what was going on with all this racial hoaxing going on with Obama? And yet the media tells us that, there's a rise of hate crime because of Trump. And yet that's not the facts, right?
Yeah, no, that's not factual. I mean, and that was kind of a softball right across the plate because, I mean, I'm center right and it's a fairly conservative show. I mean, yeah, there's no Trump surge of hate crimes. So first of all, you'll often hear, if you debate an honest liberal on this topic, one thing they'll almost invariably say, assuming that such thing exists, but one thing that they'll almost, just banter aside, one thing they'll almost inevitably say is, well, there's been a 17% increase in hate crimes in the past 2 years. And that is real data. They're not making it up. But the reason for that is that the FBI finally succeeded in pressuring almost all of these sort of tough local police agencies in the country to report their crime data to them. This has been an ongoing fight in law enforcement, sometimes a hilarious one, although it's a very serious one. But about 1,000 more law enforcement agencies reported their crime data to the Fibbies, to the feds in 2017 than did in 2015. And that's the entire reason for the rise in hate crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of numbers there. I mean, first of all, there aren't very many hate crimes. There are less than 7,000 reported felony or a misdemeanor hate crimes in a typical year.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, that was a little over that mark. There were 7,125. I've literally got this data right in front of me prepping for the show. So under Barack Obama in 2014, there were 6,518.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, that whole surge of about 600 crimes is due to better reporting, better cooperation between the feds and these great local police departments. But even if there were a surge, that would be a surge of 600 incidents in a country of 350 million people.
Mm-hmm.
And many of those incidents, as I detail in my book, Hate Crime Hoax, probably didn't happen. So, I mean, no, there's not. Donald Trump is not the cause of an epidemic surge of hate in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you count among left-leaning members of the media. I do think that what you've seen with Trump, because you would have seen this, by the way, with Bernie Sanders,
Mm-hmm.
although in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
The country also would have run out of bread under Bernie Sanders inside 2 years. That's a different story. I'm not a socialist. But with any atypical political candidate, you're going to see really negative coverage. The media also leans left. Trump's a conservative. So you saw super, super negative coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Pew Research came out a couple of months ago and said that I think it was 94% of stories about Donald Trump, about the current president, had been negative.
Mm-hmm.
If you compare that to, I mean, Hillary Clinton was a very polarizing figure. Barack Obama was the first black president, did things like truck with the Iranians, make a deal with them. Both of them had about 50% negative coverage. So the media can be tough, but we haven't seen anything recently like the treatment of Trump.
Right.
And part of that treatment is the idea that there's an unprecedented race war breaking out under Trump. That's not true. There's been virtually
no, but they don't actually believe that. I think they're driving that. In fact, Lara Logan, the journalist with CBS, she had an interview where she said, I think 90%, 97% of the journalists, reporters vote Democrat, and they're not objective and they're biased. So I think that there's clearly the media is confusing the American people.
That is a very good point. And that, by the way, goes well beyond politics, as you know. I teach an intro political science class. It's Political Science 211. And one of the things I tell my students when we talk about the media is a simple basic point. What you see in the media, whether that's the presentation of female sexuality, whether that's the presentation of what threats there are out there, like shark attack, terrorism, what you see in the media has nothing to do with reality. The major threats in society, if you're talking about suicide for our veterans, which kills 16,000 people a year, if you're talking about just driving around on the highway, which kills 45,000 people a year, prostate cancer, men's diseases are virtually ignored. I could rant about that. But all of these things you don't see in the media at all. You see things like, boy catches fire on operating table. So first, what the media presents in general is not accurate. But you're correct that they present it from a mostly liberal perspective. So, I mean, again, I'm a social scientist, good data on this. About 93% of mass media journalists are liberal. This, again, is Pew Research 2004. 93% of them tested as either 1, liberals, or 2, left-leaning moderates. That's a fact. You can Google Pew 2004, 7% conservative, and find it. And
they're doing a disservice to the American people because the media is supposed to be the fourth estate. They're supposed to inform the American people. Instead, they're pushing an agenda and they're distorting reality. And so you've got folks that are being adversely impacted by the media because they're warped. They have a warped sense of what is actually going on. And and let's get back to this Jussie Smollett business, because initially the media just jumped on that like white on rice. It's like, oh my God, this guy was attacked by these mega hat wearing racists who poured bleach on him. Okay. And the media ate it up like sugar. Okay. That's a problem. And they need to get on the TV and apologize to the American people. I believe we screwed it up. But they justify it, they twist it to explain, well, we did it this way, but this was what. They need to apologize to the American people, but they'll never do it. They're guilty. I think Trump is right. The media is fake news, and they're an enemy of the American people. I agree with that.
Well, I mean, I would say, the Chinese army is an enemy of the American people. With the media, it really depends. But I would definitely say that the media do a very bad job of honestly presenting facts. I think that's a baseline no one can disagree with. So there's a lot there in some of these questions you're asking, or comments the exchanges we're having. So, first of all, the Jussie Smollett thing was absolutely, well, first of all, I think the media may have to apologize. Did you see that the kids from the fake incident before that, Covington Catholic, they're suing the Washington Post and CNN for $500 million?
I thought it was $250 million. That's good. Because when you hit people in the pocket, then it becomes a different story. And the media, these people need to be hit in the pocket. Because the bottom line in America, it's about the money.
Yeah, which is actually very healthy, as opposed to being about the fanatical religious belief or the dislike of the tribe over the hill that wears leeks on their helmets. Yeah, we Americans tend to focus on
the money.
Living long and prospering, if
right.
you will. And I think that's good.
And we should and people should. And this is what I talk about on my show. I want Black Americans to focus on the money. Don't focus on racism. Focus on getting the money. Because in Los Angeles, we've got 40% of the homeless are Black folks. That means 40%. Those Black guys aren't making money. If we were making money,
definition, yeah.
You cannot see. You drive around the city, you see Black guys on bicycles or homeless. I grew up in Los Angeles. We have basically disappeared in Los Angeles, and nobody says anything. This bothers me. This is important. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Well, there's a lot there. So first of all, yeah, I think that I do a lot of mentoring for Black men and, white ones too, if they want to join the mentoring program. I live in Appalachia, so there's plenty of broke white guys. But I think that one of the things I say when I mentor young Black men, they ask me, what can I do as a Black man in society? And one of my answers is, well, what any other man would do in society. There are certain things that bring wealth and success in a reasonably free country like America. Your life might be affected 2 or 5% because of racism, but that could also happen because you're short or your parents aren't wealthy. But the vast, largest predictor of success in your life is going to be basic things that you do independently yourself. So I'm sure you've heard I heard this from a preacher when I was about 14. I later checked it out, found out it's absolutely true when I was a social scientist. But if you do
Professor Reilly, there's my music. We're going to take a break. How do you feel about taking phone calls?
I'm great with it. Love it.
Okay, we're going to come back from the break. And when we do, we'll open up the phone lines. You can call in and talk to Professor Wilfred Reilly, who is a professor of political science at Kentucky State University. He wrote the book, Hate, Crime, Hoax. You got to get the book, Why the Left is Selling a Fake Race War. Listen, this man is an expert. He has the data. He knows what's going on. It's a fake thing. Okay, Trump is right. We'll be right back. This is the Naked Truth Report. I'm Kathleen Wells. We'll be right back. We're opening up the phones. Thanks. Welcome back. I'm with Professor Wilfred Reilly, who is the author. Well, he's a professor of political science at Kentucky State University. He is also the author of the book, Hate, Crime, Hoax, How the Left is Selling a Fake Race War. Hey, we all knew it, right? Some of you folks didn't know it, but I knew it. But the other thing that we knew is that we knew Jussie was lying. But the media pretended like he wasn't. And someone said on the YouTube channel, I want to remind folks, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you want to see me live on YouTube, you can go to my website, thenakedtruthreport.com. Or you can go to my YouTube channel, The Naked Truth Report. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I want to get those numbers up. folks. But someone said on my YouTube channel, they said, Queen Latifah is still trying to press this issue that Jesse is telling the truth. See, this is what gets me about these Hollywood folks, and particularly Black Hollywood folks. They sell Black Americans a bill of goods that are just completely not worth anything. And we keep going for it. Oh, are you on the line, Professor Reilly?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Oh, okay. But anyway, this is what bothers me about the media, and it bothers me about Black celebrities. It's like they have been paid to go out and screw up the thoughts and thinking capacity of Black Americans. What do you think about that?
I think that most rich liberals genuinely believe, and I'm going to law school at the University of Illinois and working in downtown Chicago in the financial markets. I've met a lot of rich liberals. I can't imagine that Hollywood would be very much different, although it's richer and more liberal. Mm-hmm. But I think most people that are promoting the culturally dominant narrative on the left believe it. And we had a good conversation about this before the break. That narrative is sort of that America hasn't changed very much. Mm-hmm. Racism is everywhere. You hear all these terms, white privilege, cultural appropriation, institutional racism, subtle bigotry. I would agree with you that believing that is going to be pretty harmful if you're a young Black man or woman. Mm-hmm. And in reality, so the United States of America desegregated in 1954, not perfectly, but you can't have all Black or all white schools, and you haven't been able to for several generations. Mm-hmm. Civil Rights Act was 1965, making racism criminally and civilly illegal. Mm-hmm. So if you feel you've been discriminated against, you don't need to walk around in the street with a sign. You can sue somebody for cash money. Mm-hmm. Affirmative action's actually been the law for 52 years, pro-minority affirmative action. That came with the Philadelphia Plan under Mr. Nixon in 1967. So the idea that America is a remarkably racist country isn't true in any practical way. I actually work in higher education, and if you're a Black kid, you are as likely to get into college at most universities as a white kid with an SAT score that's 100 plus points higher. Mm-hmm. So the more people hear that there's some invisible force out there holding them down, the less likely at some level they probably are to succeed. So I don't think that celebrities yammering at working class Black people about how they're oppressed does any good. I don't necessarily think that's mostly Black celebrities, though. One of the things that I've found is that most of the craziest woke liberals are upper middle class white people.
Oh, yeah. Well, but Black celebrities just mimic them. Do you know what I mean? They just they just go along with whatever they say, Black celebrities. And particularly on social media, I know that most Black folks on social media follow what the celebrities say and post that stuff. You know what I mean? Then more than white celebrities. They post what Black celebrities are saying about this and that and so on and so forth. But the thing that I wanted to point out, did I lose it, is that even though there was it depends on we have to define racism. See, I don't go along with the definition that we get in the media, like it's likes and dislikes of individuals and saying bad things about individuals, using bad words. That's not the definition I use. And I don't think that's the proper definition. In fact, my mentor is Dr. Claude Anderson, and he says that racism is competition between groups. Okay, so it's not it's a group-based phenomena. It's not interested in individuals, bad things, dislikes, or statements. It's about what is one group doing, how are they competing? And when I look at it that way, I say Black America is at the bottom. We're at the bottom. We were worth let's see, we had the 1/2 of 1% of the wealth of America right after slavery, when there were only 200,000 free black folks. Today, we, despite 5 decades, 6 decades of voting Democrat, we only have, some figures say 1.1.5%. Others say 2.6% of the wealth of America. So we are losing. We are losing. As I said, we're 40% of the homeless in America. So I think something needs to be done. I don't see racism as saying, oh, I don't like that guy, he looks funny. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think there are different kinds of racism. And again, I don't think America, compared to a number of the countries I've traveled to, or certainly that our troops have traveled to, is really all that racist. But I mean, what you're describing sounds like institutional racism, which is, to me, institutional racism is a system that legally treats people differently. This used to be really common. It used to be common in white countries, wealthy black countries like Ethiopia, Asian countries. But so during segregation, for example, you had one bus for white people and you had an older, slightly worse bus for black people. That's institutional racism.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's individual racism where racism's traditionally been defined as believing one race is inferior to another one. So if I just hate Chinese people, if I consistently describe Asians as small, weak, overstudious, from poor countries, things like this, I think it's fair to call me a racist. I think that what's referred to by most liberal Americans today as racism isn't really racism at all. So differences in performance don't by themselves show racism. That's one of Tom Sowell's big points, as you brought up earlier. So when people are arguing that there's a lot of racism today, they rarely say there are laws mandating racism, because there aren't. What they say is, well, if you look at the SAT, you notice that the average Asian score is 1100, whites get a 1050, and blacks only get a 960, so math is racist. It's that kind of thing. But that's a really illogical argument. I mean, by that standard, the NBA is the most racist organization in the world, and it's racist in favor of us, of African Americans. Whereas it wildly discriminates against Asians and Jews and Mexican Americans and so on. So I don't think that just showing a difference in performance, more men are arrested than women, shows bigotry at all. The reason could be that men or blacks or Southern whites or whatever have a higher crime rate. That's usually what it is.
But see, this is the position I take. If Black America is worth less than only has the wealth of 2.6% or 1.5% of the wealth of America, despite all these policies, affirmative action, civil rights, voting Democrats for 6 decades, this, that, and the other, all these programs, LBJ's Great Society, all these, we spent $3.2 trillion on LBJ Great Society, and Black America is now only worth 2.6% only has 2.6% of the wealth of America. There's a problem. Black America, there's a problem. And the problem is the policies of liberals. Because once Black American got with the Democratic Party, we no longer had daddies in the home. How are you going to get wealth with a father in the home?
Yeah, I mean, this actually is something I'm pretty conservative about. So I think there are two problems here.
Okay.
One is the distinction between wealth and income. So hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the issue on my phone. But what is the distinction between wealth and income? So if you look at income, minorities, and for that matter, Black people, are doing pretty well. I think African-American female income is about 95% of white female income. Black men are a bit dragged down by the fair number of brothers in jail, so forth, but it's still well over 80%. So in terms of Asians make more money than whites. African immigrants make more money than whites. So I think in terms of getting good jobs, Asians and middle-class Blacks have kind of cracked the code. The issue on one level is that Black people don't seem to be investing a lot of that money in long-term wealth. So we buy, I think it's 65% of the Air Jordans in the country. If you see someone with rims on a nice domestic vehicle, that's very often an African-American guy. So income-wise, Black people, and certainly other minorities, if you include Asians, Jews, Arab Americans, are doing pretty well, but that money isn't necessarily going from income to wealth, if that makes sense. I think another thing that is a big factor here that you mentioned is the lack of dads.
Yeah, because most, I don't know what the exact number is for the income that Black women make. But I know that most Black women are single because we only have 27% two-parent families. And if you're single, you have a greater likelihood of being poor. Like a third of Black kids are in poverty. So I don't understand how you can say, I don't think that most Black women are making good money. I don't think so.
Well, that's the difference between, black women are actually doing pretty well. I mean, black women make about as much money as white women. The issue is the collapse of families.
Mm-hmm.
So all this is actually, it's stuff we study in social science, and it's complex and it's interesting, right? I mean, so when you look at black household income, one of the things both alt-right racists and liberals who are crying racism will always say is, well, black income is 40 or 60% or whatever it is of white income. That's household income. The issue with that is that about 70% of black households, and a disturbing but lower figure like 30, 40% of white households, only have one person in them.
Right.
So most of the white households are mother-father families where you have an oldest son that's also working. Most of the black households are a mom with younger kids that aren't working. So if you have 3 people working, you're going to have more money than if you have one person working. So I think a lot of this gets back to the failure of fatherhood among blacks and now also among working class whites.
Right. And that came with LBJ's Great Society. Right? And free sex feminism, the sexual revolution. Because at one point we had more two-parent families than white families, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I think I talk about that in the book, and in my opinion, and obviously your own opinion here has been thought out. There are a couple different positions, but in my opinion, there were 4 things that destroyed the working class American family, and that especially hit blacks hard. If you look at places like Motown, the Motor City, they were black working class cities. There's similar white stories of woe about this, though, like the song Allentown. But 4 things that destroyed the working class family: 1, no-fault divorce and the normalization of illegitimacy. 2, pay per child welfare. That was the big one. 3, the outsourcing of blue collar jobs, and that's the only one where the right bears any blame. I mean, both parties have been shipping American jobs overseas wholesale for decades. That's something that many countries like France and Japan have made illegal. You had a great ad during the break for tech workers unifying against the H-1B system. That absolutely makes good common sense. Like, there's no real reason to bring in millions of very well-trained foreign workers to do the jobs that we have guys doing pretty well. So, but pay for child welfare, normalization of illegitimacy through no-fault divorce, pro-sex feminism, I think you're right about that, outsourcing of jobs. I would say a 4th one is the collapse of the cities as we retreated from effective policing for a while. One of the things that became very entrenched in kind of the American mindset in the 1960s was the first wave of this BLM BS, cops are racist, pull them back. And you saw crime skyrocket. I mean, crime, this is something that paralleled the rise of illegitimacy, and the two kind of fed off each other. In the 1960s and 70s, crime increased about 800% in the USA. So that's crazy. That's something.
What percent? 600%?
500 to 800%. Yeah, if you're saying 600, that's right about. Yeah, crime skyrocketed
from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, from 1959 to 1993, I think your 600 is probably right on point, but crime increased 500 to 800%. I went with the higher figure there, but if you look at the number of murders, I mean, New York right now, it's a violent city. There are neighborhoods you wouldn't go to, but they only have about 500 murders a year, only in quotes. In Chicago, we beat them.
And that's correlated with blacks moving, the great migration from blacks to the South to these liberal cities with liberal policies that kept them poor. You only commit crime if you're poor, right?
Well, having worked on a trading floor, I'm not sure about that.
Well, I mean, I know you're saying white collar crimes, but I'm talking about low level crime. You know what I'm saying? What is it called? I think
you're more likely to steal a pillow from Sears if you're poor. Yeah, I mean, this actually is kind of interesting. In criminology, which I've taught a few classes, and we say that criminals generally break down as either scum, sinner, or sociopath. So sinner is, you want to do a gram of coke at a party with a woman that's not your wife. Not a lot of sympathy for it, but pretty frequent. Scum, a sociopath is stockbroker, lawyer, doing some things they probably shouldn't. Scum is the majority of crime. Like, you don't have it. I think you're absolutely right about this. You don't have any money, so you knock an old lady over the head and take her purse.
And when you're poor, listen, during the turn of the century, the Irish and the Jewish and the Italians, they were involved in crimes because they were new to America and they didn't have money. So it's not a racial thing why people are committing crimes. It's an economic thing why people commit crimes. They're poor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent point you just made, by the way. The issues in the black community are not unique to black people.
Mm.
When people say a lot of these things, like the crime rate in the black community is 2.5 times the white crime rate, which it is if you exclude white-collar crime, but that's another story. When people say things like the tested black IQ is only 92, blacks tend to live in high-density urban areas, every single one of those things, as crazy as that sounds, would have been true for Jews in 1910.
And the Irish.
Oh, yeah, the Irish were worse. That's why the term paddy wagon still exists today.
Exactly.
That literally means big truck we threw a bunch of drunk Irish dudes into.
Right.
Yeah, the Irish had an unbelievable rate of crime. If you look at some of those neighborhoods like Hell's Kitchen, 5 Points, I sometimes cite the nonfiction Gangs of New York when I speak. It's an incredible book.
Yeah.
The fire companies used to get into brawls with one another. These would all be Irish males. So, yeah, if you can't stack poor people who drink. Like, if you take a bunch of people with very limited prospects that are in unfaithful romantic relationships and put them around a bunch of alcohol and cocaine and take jobs away from that area, you're going to get a dangerous area.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
pretty much all I had for that one.
What did you say?
Oh, I was kidding. I was like, that's pretty much all I had for that one. I mean, I think that sentence kind of sums it up. If you got a bunch of jobless guys in a tough neighborhood, you're going to have a lot of crime.
Exactly. And you know, these things to me are so basic and fundamental. And I don't know why most black folks can't see that the policies, because these are all policies that are policies that are keeping black folks relegated to a permanent underclass, to homelessness and bicycle riding and no money. And I don't know why most of my people can't see that they must change the policies. You know, I don't see, and why do they think that having bigger government is the answer? I can't put that together. You know, go ahead.
I think to some extent because they're being lied to. I mean, first of all, I think most ordinary black people are pretty sensible. I mean, I like African Americans as a group. I like most groups of human beings, but certainly American blacks are one of my favorites group I'm in. But I think the average black guy in Brooklyn that owns a barber shop is plenty capable of seeing if you don't have dads around, you're going to have more crime. I think one of the big problems for the black community, there's an old saying, so what's being said is so complicated and silly that only a very brilliant person could have thought of it. I think that on the political left, a lot of people simply refuse to believe in basic things like more guns in a neighborhood means less crime. And instead duck around these simple facts to get to these very complex, crazy solutions. Like, no, the problem in the black community is racism 4 degrees removed despite affirmative action. Yeah, I think most people can figure out that if you don't have a lot of jobs and you don't have a lot of dads around, you're going to have a lot of violence. So I don't know if it's black people. I don't know if it's black people that actually believe this, or if it's something that's being consistently fed to black people by a few elites or members of the media that's unfortunately influential.
Well, I mean, I think when you go on social media, most blacks on social media, like Twitter and Facebook and all that, racism. Even Nina Turner, you know what? It's like racism, you know. But anyway, before I let you go, we got 2 more minutes, and I'm going to have you back on because you're such a energetic and fascinating guest. We could talk about a lot of things, you and I. So before I let you go, I wanted to say, okay, Jussie Smollett has been indicted with 16 felony counts. How do you think this is going to play out?
I think this is going to be a fascinating circus. One thing I very much think, to the point of betting on it on sites like well, at any rate, obviously would never get engaged in any kind of illegal gambling, but one thing I certainly think is that Jussie Smollett is going to begin immediately portraying himself as a victim. He's going to claim either deep-seated racism or some kind of drug addiction. And I bet that if you Google, I haven't Googled, I'm an ethical man about this kind of thing if I have anything writing on it. But if you Google, I bet you'll find some story like Smollett says he's addicted to cocaine. That's gonna be how this plays out. He's going to deny he did it for a while. Then he's going to break down in a tearful interview and say the reason is that white racism has driven him to abuse drugs. And I personally think he's going to do some time. I mean, the feds generally, with legal background, the feds generally don't play around about this kind of thing. He's being charged with 16 felony counts right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like he orchestrated the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
not just the beating.
Mm-hmm.
But weeks ago, he got this terrible letter crushed up what looked like anthrax powder, the N-word. I think there were pictures of him in a hangman's noose. He wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the latest development in the case. He apparently wrote this letter and went to a mailbox outside of Chicago and shipped it to himself. I mean, this is some Professor Moriarty level.
I know. That's good. There's my music. It's like so bizarre. We're going to stay. I'm going to have you back on. You're a great guest, Professor Reilly. You're so energetic and you're so involved. You know what's going. You and I can have a great conversation. I'm going to have you back on. I really appreciate you being a guest. We're going to talk about Jesse again because this is going to be a circus. It's going to be funny, right?
Yeah, it's going to be, I would love to comment on the trial as it goes on, some like 5-minute segments. I mean, this is going to be it's going to be interesting.
Okay, I'm going to have you on the show to do exactly that. Will you stay open for that?
Yes, I will, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Reilly. This is the Naked Truth Report. Thank you, Professor Reilly. This is the Naked Truth Report. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells. Don't forget to go to my YouTube channel, the Naked Truth Report YouTube channel, and subscribe. I want to get those numbers up, and also go to the Naked Truth Report Facebook page and like that page. I'll see you next week. I haven't decided what I'm going to talk about next week yet. I might just not have any guests and do my monologue. You know how I love doing that. Anyway, I'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.